The unlikely encounter. The desolate landscape of Zeta 9 stretched as far as the eye could see, a barren wasteland of rust-colored rocks and swirling dust storms. Dr. Alexis Chen adjusted her protective mask, squinting against the harsh glare of the binary suns overhead. As the lead xenobiologist on this survey mission, she had seen her fair share of inhospitable planets, but Zeta 9 took the cake. "Anything on the scanners, Martinez?" She called out to her research assistant, who was fiddling with a handheld device nearby. Carlos Martinez shook his head, frustration evident even through his protective gear. "Nothing but background radiation and mineral deposits, Doc. This rock is as dead as they come." Alexis sighed, trying not to let disappointment cloud her judgment. They had been on Zeta 9 for 3 standard Earth weeks, and so far, their search for signs of extinct alien life had turned up empty. The Galactic Science Council was getting impatient, and funding for these deep space expeditions didn't come cheap. "All right, let's pack it up and head back to the shuttle. We'll try Sector G7 tomorrow," Alexis decided, already mentally composing her daily report. Another day, another failure. As they trudged back towards their temporary base camp, a distant rumble caught Alexis's attention. She paused, holding up a hand to signal Martinez to stop. "You hear that?" she asked, straining her ears. Martinez nodded slowly, his body tensing. "Sounds like thunder, but the atmosphere's too thin for." His words were cut off as the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. In the distance, a plume of dust rose ominously against the amber sky. "Quake!" Alexis shouted, grabbing Martinez's arm. "Run." They sprinted across the uneven terrain, their heavy boots kicking up clouds of reddish dust. The rumbling grew louder, and Alexis could feel the vibrations intensifying with each passing second. Just as they reached the relative safety of their reinforced base camp, a massive fissure split the ground behind them, swallowing up the area where they had been standing moments before. Alexis and Martinez huddled in the doorway of their shelter, watching in awe as the landscape before them shifted and cracked. The quake lasted for several minutes, though it felt like an eternity. When it finally subsided, leaving an eerie silence in its wake, Alexis let out a shaky breath. "Well," she said, trying to inject some levity into her voice, "I guess we found something interesting after all." Martinez managed a weak chuckle. "Yeah, nearly getting swallowed by the planet. Real exciting, Doc." As the dust began to settle, Alexis's scientific curiosity overrode her lingering fear. She stepped out of the shelter, her eyes scanning the transformed terrain before her. The fissure that had nearly claimed them stretched for kilometers in either direction, a jagged wound in the planet's surface. "We need to document this," she said, reaching for her datapad. "This level of tectonic activity wasn't in any of our preliminary scans. It could completely change our understanding of Zeta 9's geological." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she caught sight of something gleaming in the newly exposed rock face of the fissure. "Martinez," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you seeing this?" Her assistant joined her, following her gaze. There, embedded in the ancient stone, was what appeared to be a metallic structure. Its surface was dull and pitted with age, but its artificial nature was unmistakable. "Is that a ship?" Martinez asked, his voice filled with wonder. Alexis nodded slowly, her mind racing with the implications. "Not just any ship. Look at the design, the alloys used. This isn't like anything in our database. We're looking at genuine alien technology, buried for who knows how long." Excitement coursed through her veins as she began to document their find. This was it, the discovery that could justify their entire mission and then some. As she worked, taking scans and images, a movement caught her eye. "Did you see that?" she asked Martinez, who was busy setting up more advanced scanning equipment. "See what, Doc?" Alexis frowned, peering into the shadowy recesses of the exposed ship. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw something move within, but that was impossible. Nothing could have survived being buried for millennia, especially not on a planet as inhospitable as Zeta 9. Probably just debris settling, she muttered, more to herself than to Martinez. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As the suns began to set, casting long shadows across the alien landscape, Alexis and Martinez worked tirelessly to gather as much data as possible. They had already sent an emergency transmission back to their orbiting research vessel, requesting additional personnel and equipment to help with the excavation. "We should head back to the shuttle for the night," Martinez suggested, stifling a yawn. "It's not safe to be out here after dark, especially with the increased tectonic activity." Alexis nodded reluctantly, every fiber of her being wanted to stay and continue investigating, but she knew the risks were too great. "You're right. We'll come back at first light and—" A low, guttural growl interrupted her, sending chills down her spine. Both scientists froze, their eyes darting around in the fading light. "Please tell me that was your stomach," Alexis whispered. Martinez shook his head slowly, his face pale beneath his protective gear. "Doc, I think we should run. Now." But before they could move, a massive shape burst from the shadows of the exposed ship. In the dim light, Alexis could make out a creature unlike anything she had ever seen before. It was easily the size of a small vehicle, with a body that seemed to be a horrifying blend of organic and mechanical parts. Multiple limbs, some ending in wickedly sharp claws, others in what looked like weaponry, supported its bulk. Its head, if you could call it that, was a mass of sensors and what appeared to be battle-scarred armor plating. The creature let out another bone-chilling roar, its strange sensory apparatus focused intently on the two humans before it. Alexis's scientific mind raced, trying to categorize and understand what she was seeing, even as her survival instincts screamed at her to flee. "It's some kind of war beast," she breathed, her voice a mixture of terror and fascination. "An organic weapon, maybe. But how could it have survived all this time?" Martinez grabbed her arm, his voice urgent. "Doc, we can theorize later. Right now, we need to get out of here." As if triggered by their movement, the creature charged. Its multiple limbs propelled it forward with shocking speed, covering the distance between them in seconds. Alexis and Martinez ran, their hearts pounding in their chests. They could hear the beast behind them, its heavy footfalls and mechanical whirring a terrifying soundtrack to their flight. Just as Alexis thought they were done for, her foot caught on a rock, sending her sprawling to the ground. She turned, expecting to see the creature upon her, only to find it had stopped several meters away. It stood there, its strange sensory apparatus focused on her, making an odd clicking sound. To Alexis's amazement, the beast's aggressive posture seemed to relax slightly. It took a tentative step forward, then another, its movements now more curious than threatening. As it drew closer, Alexis could see the toll that millennia of hibernation had taken on the creature. Parts of its mechanical components were corroded or missing entirely, and its organic sections looked malnourished and weak. "Doc," Martinez hissed from nearby, having realized she was no longer running beside him. "What are you doing? We need to go." But Alexis held up a hand, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "Wait," she said softly. "I don't think it wants to hurt us. Look at it. It's injured, maybe even dying." The war beast was now close enough that Alexis could have reached out and touched it if she dared. Its clicking noises had taken on an almost plaintive quality, and she could see what looked like coolant or some other fluid leaking from joints in its armored hide. In that moment, Alexis made a decision that would change her life, and potentially the course of human history, forever. Instead of running, she slowly reached into her pack and pulled out an emergency ration bar. With trembling hands, she unwrapped it and held it out to the creature. "It's okay," she said softly, not even sure if the beast could understand her. "We're not going to hurt you." For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, with surprising gentleness, the war beast extended one of its less weaponized limbs and took the ration bar. It brought the food to a section of its body that Alexis guessed might serve as a mouth, and with a series of clicks and whirs, began to consume it. Martinez had cautiously made his way back to Alexis's side, his expression a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Doc, what are you doing? That thing could kill us both in seconds." Alexis shook her head, her eyes never leaving the strange creature before her. "No, Carlos, can't you see? This isn't just some mindless weapon. It's intelligent, maybe even sentient, and it's been alone for who knows how long. We can't just leave it here." As if understanding her words, the war beast made a soft trilling sound, leaning slightly towards Alexis. In that moment, she saw past its fearsome exterior to the lonely, desperate being beneath. "We're taking it with us," she declared, her voice firm with resolve. Martinez sputtered in disbelief. "What? Doc, you can't be serious. The protocols, the quarantine procedures." "To hell with the protocols," Alexis interrupted, surprising even herself with her vehemence. "This is the discovery of a lifetime, Carlos. An alien life form, a technological marvel beyond our wildest dreams. If we leave it here, it'll die. And with it, we might lose our only chance to understand an entire alien civilization." As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind Zeta 9's horizon, Alexis Chen stood face to face with a creature out of humanity's darkest nightmares. But where others might have seen only a monster, she saw a miracle, a bridge between worlds, a chance for understanding. With gentle words and careful movements, she began the monumental task of coaxing the war beast towards their shuttle. It was slow going, the creature clearly wary and weakened, but it followed nonetheless. As they made their way across the darkening landscape, Alexis's mind raced with questions and possibilities. Who had created this magnificent being? What wars had it fought in? What wonders had it seen? And most importantly, what would happen when she introduced it to human society? One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. As the unlikely trio, two humans and an alien war beast, reached the shuttle, the first chapter of an extraordinary adventure came to a close. But for Alexis Chen, it was just the beginning. Forming the bond. The shuttle hummed with tension as it broke through Zeta 9's thin atmosphere. Alexis sat in the cockpit, her eyes darting between the flight controls and the rear compartment where their extraordinary passenger resided. The war beast had barely fit through the airlock, its bulk taking up most of the small craft's cargo space. "I still think this is a terrible idea, Doc," Martins muttered from the co-pilot's seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. Alexis sighed, understanding her assistant's fear, but unable to quell her own excitement. "I know it's risky, Carlos, but think about what we could learn. This creature could revolutionize our understanding of alien biology, technology, maybe even psychology." A muffled thud from the rear compartment made them both jump. The war beast had been surprisingly docile during boarding, but Alexis knew they were far from out of the woods. As they approached the research vessel in orbit, Alexis took a deep breath. "Zeta Base, this is Shuttle Alpha requesting emergency docking procedures. Prepare quarantine protocols." There was a moment of static before a confused voice responded. "Shuttle Alpha, please clarify. Our scans are showing an unidentified life form aboard. Over." "Affirmative, Zeta Base," Alexis replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We've made first contact. Repeat, we have a living alien specimen aboard." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. As soon as they docked, the shuttle was swarmed by personnel in hazmat suits. Alexis insisted on being present as they carefully maneuvered the war beast into a specially designed containment unit. She watched with a mixture of concern and fascination as the creature's sensors swiveled, taking in its new surroundings. "Easy now," she found herself murmuring, though she knew the beast likely couldn't understand her words. "You're safe here." To everyone's surprise, the war beast remained calm throughout the transfer. It seemed to focus on Alexis, its strange sensory apparatus tracking her movements. As the containment unit sealed shut, Alexis felt an unexpected pang of separation. The debriefing that followed was intense. Alexis found herself defending her decision to bring the creature aboard, facing skepticism and outright hostility from some of her colleagues. "Do you have any idea of the risks you've taken?" Dr. Emerson, the mission's security officer, thundered. "That thing could be carrying any number of pathogens, not to mention its clear military applications." Alexis stood her ground. "With all due respect, Dr. Emerson, we're scientists. Taking calculated risks in the pursuit of knowledge is what we do. This creature represents an unprecedented opportunity for study." After hours of debate, a compromise was reached. The war beast would remain in quarantine, with only a select team allowed access for study. Alexis, as the one who had made first contact, would lead the research efforts. Over the next few weeks, Alexis spent every waking moment with the alien creature. She observed its behaviors, ran countless tests, and slowly began to piece together its incredible biology. The war beast was a marvel of bioengineering, its organic components seamlessly integrated with advanced technology. "Look at this," she explained to Martinez one day, pointing to a holographic display of the creature's internal structure. "Its nervous system is augmented by what appears to be a quantum computer. And these glands here, they produce a metal organic compound I've never seen before." But beyond the scientific fascination, Alexis found herself forming an unexpected connection with the beast. She began to recognize patterns in its clicks and whirs, associating certain sounds with specific moods or needs. The creature, in turn, seemed to grow more responsive to her presence. One afternoon, as Alexis was running a series of cognitive tests, she noticed the war beast struggling with a holographic puzzle she had set up. Without thinking, she reached out and gently touched its armored hide. "It's okay," she said softly. "Try looking at it from this angle." To her amazement, the creature stilled at her touch. It turned its sensors towards her, emitting a series of soft trills. Then, following her guidance, it solved the puzzle with surprising ease. Alexis felt a lump form in her throat. "You understand me, don't you?" she whispered. "You're not just some weapon. You're intelligent, maybe even sentient." From that moment on, Alexis's approach to studying the war beast shifted. She began to treat their sessions less like experiments and more like a cultural exchange. She talked to the creature constantly, explaining what she was doing and why. To her delight, it seemed to respond, showing increased cooperation, and even what she could swear was curiosity. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between human and alien deepened. Alexis lobbied successfully for the war beast to be moved to a larger, more comfortable containment area. She introduced enrichment activities, watching with joy as the creature engaged with puzzles and even simple games. "I'm thinking of giving it a name," Alexis confided to Martinez one evening as they reviewed the day's data. Her assistant looked up, surprised. "A name? Doc, don't you think you're getting a bit attached?" Alexis shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Maybe. But it feels right. I was thinking, nexus. It means a connection or series of connections. Seems fitting, don't you think?" Martinez shook his head, but there was a hint of fondness in his exasperation. "Whatever you say, Doc. Just remember, it's not a pet. It's a potentially dangerous alien life form." But Alexis's mind was made up. The next day, she entered the containment area with a spring in her step. The war beast, Nexus, greeted her with a series of cheerful clicks. "Good morning, Nexus," she said warmly. "Ready to try something new today?" As she began setting up their latest experiment, Alexis felt a sense of contentment wash over her. She knew there were still many challenges ahead. The rest of the crew remained wary of Nexus, and eventually, they would need to decide what to do when the mission ended. But for now, in this moment of interspecies understanding, Alexis allowed herself to hope. Perhaps, she thought, This unlikely bond between a human scientist and an alien war beast could be the first step towards a broader connection between their civilizations. As Nexus trilled inquisitively at the new equipment, Alexis smiled. Whatever the future held, she knew that her life, and potentially the course of human history, had been irrevocably changed by her decision on that dusty planet. The day's research began, human and alien working side by side. Two beings from different worlds united by curiosity and the simple joy of discovery. A new home. The sleek research vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Inside, Alexis Chen paced nervously in front of Nexus's containment unit, her mind racing with all the potential outcomes of their arrival. "It's going to be okay," she murmured, more to herself than to the alien war beast. Nexus trilled softly in response, its sensors tracking her movements. As they touched down at a high-security facility, Alexis felt a mix of excitement and dread. The past 6 months of their return journey had been spent preparing for this moment, but she knew that no amount of planning could fully prepare them for the challenges ahead. The reception committee was a mix of top scientists, military personnel, and government officials. As Nexus was carefully transported from the ship, Alexis could hear the gasps and murmurs of shock. Despite all the reports and video feeds they had sent ahead, seeing the alien war beast in person was an entirely different experience. Dr. Chen, a stern-looking woman in a crisp suit, approached. "I'm Director Harriet Sloan of the Global Extraterrestrial Research Initiative. We need to talk." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of debriefings, tests, and heated debates. Alexis found herself constantly defending Nexus, explaining the bond they had formed and the incredible potential for learning and cooperation. "You don't understand," she argued during one particularly tense meeting. "Nexus isn't just some mindless weapon. It's intelligent, curious, maybe even emotional. We have an opportunity here to learn from an advanced civilization. And what if that advanced civilization comes looking for their war machine?" General Reeves, a gruff military advisor, countered. "Have you considered that you might have brought an interstellar war to our doorstep, Dr. Chen?" The questions were relentless, the scrutiny intense, but through it all, Alexis stood firm in her conviction that bringing Nexus to Earth had been the right decision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of deliberations, a decision was reached. Nexus would be allowed to stay, housed in a specially constructed facility where a select team of scientists could continue to study and interact with it. Alexis, naturally, would lead the project. As they settled into their new home, a sprawling high-tech compound in a remote area, Alexis felt a sense of relief wash over her. But she knew their challenges were far from over. The first major hurdle came in the form of public opinion. When news of Nexus's existence leaked to the media, the response was explosive. Protests erupted outside the facility, with some groups demanding Nexus be destroyed, while others called for its immediate release. Alexis found herself thrust into the spotlight, giving interviews and trying to educate the public about Nexus. "It's not a threat," she explained patiently to a skeptical news anchor. "Nexus has shown no aggression since we found it. In fact, it's displayed a remarkable capacity for learning and cooperation." But not everyone was convinced. One afternoon, as Alexis was working with Nexus on a complex problem-solving task, alarms blared throughout the facility. "Security breach in Sector 7. A robotic voice announced. "All personnel evacuate immediately." Alexis's heart raced as she realized Sector 7 was right next to Nexus enclosure. Without thinking, she rushed towards the danger, ignoring the shouts of her colleagues. As she rounded a corner, she came face to face with a group of armed intruders. They wore patches identifying them as members of an extreme anti-alien group. "Step aside," their leader growled, raising a weapon. "We're here to eliminate the alien threat." Alexis stood her ground, her voice surprisingly steady. "You don't understand. Nexus isn't a threat. It's a sentient being, capable of thought and feeling. If you just take the time to..." Her words were cut short as one of the intruders shoved her aside, making a break for Nexus's enclosure. But before anyone could react, a massive form burst through the reinforced door. Nexus stood there, its imposing frame blocking the hallway. But instead of attacking, it gently nudged Alexis behind it, positioning its armored body as a shield. The intruders faltered, clearly not expecting to face the alien war beast directly. In that moment of hesitation, security forces swarmed in, quickly subduing the group. As the chaos subsided, Alexis looked up at Nexus in awe. You protected me," she said softly. Nexus trilled in response, its sensors focused intently on her as if checking for injuries. The incident marked a turning point in public perception. Footage of Nexus protecting Alexis went viral, challenging the narrative of the alien as a mindless weapon. People began to see what Alexis had known all along, that Nexus was capable of compassion, loyalty, and maybe even love. In the weeks that followed, Alexis worked tirelessly to build on this shift in public opinion. She organized carefully controlled public demonstrations, showing off Nexus's problem-solving skills and gentle nature. Slowly but surely, fear began to give way to fascination. One sunny afternoon, as Alexis sat with Nexus in its outdoor enclosure, she noticed a group of wide-eyed children peering through the fence. In a moment of inspiration, she waved them over. "Would you like to meet Nexus?" she asked, smiling at their mixture of excitement and nervousness. As the children cautiously approached, Nexus lowered itself to their level, its movements slow and deliberate. Alexis watched in amazement as the alien war beast, once feared as a harbinger of destruction, gently allowed the children to touch its armored hide and marveled at their laughter. It was a small moment, but to Alexis it represented everything she had been fighting for. As she watched Nexus interact with the children, she felt a surge of hope for the future. Perhaps, she thought, this unlikely friendship between a human and an alien war beast could be the key to opening humanity's minds and hearts to the wonders of the universe. The road ahead would still be challenging, full of scientific discoveries, ethical dilemmas, and the ongoing task of bridging the gap between two vastly different species. But as Nexus trilled happily at the delighted children, Alexis knew that every struggle had been worth it. They had found more than just a new home. They had found a new beginning, not just for Nexus, but for humanity's place in the cosmos, proving their worth. The klaxons blared throughout the facility, their urgent wail cutting through the usual hum of scientific equipment. Alexis Chen sprinted down the corridor, her heart pounding in her chest. She burst into the main control room, breathless. "What's happening?" she demanded, her eyes scanning the sea of worried faces. Director Sloan turned from the giant display screen, her expression grim. "We've got an incoming object, Dr. Chen. Large, moving fast, and definitely not one of ours." Alexis felt her blood run cold. Ever since bringing Nexus to Earth, this had been her greatest fear, that something would follow them home. She stared at the blinking dot on the screen, watching as it hurtled towards Earth at impossible speeds. "Have we tried communicating?" she asked, her mind racing. "No response to any of our hails," General Reeves growled. "Whatever it is, it's not here for a friendly chat." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, with officials debating response strategies and military options, Alexis felt a tugging sensation in her mind. She had grown accustomed to this feeling over the past months. It was Nexus, reaching out through the strange, quasi-telepathic link they had developed. Without a word, she slipped out of the control room and hurried to Nexus' enclosure. The massive war beast was agitated, its multiple limbs twitching and its sensors swiveling rapidly. "You sense it too, don't you?" Alexis said softly, placing a hand on Nexus's armored hide. The alien trilled softly, leaning into her touch. In that moment, Alexis made a decision. "We need to tell them what you know," she said firmly. "Come on." To the shock of everyone in the control room, Alexis returned with Nexus in tow. The alien war beast barely fit through the door, its imposing form filling the space with an almost palpable tension. "Dr. Chen, what is the meaning of this?" Director Sloan demanded. Alexis stood tall, her hand resting on Nexus. "Nexus knows something about our visitor. We need to listen." What followed was unlike anything the assembled officials had ever experienced. Through a combination of gestures, trills, and the strange mental link Alexis and Nexus shared, the alien war beast began to communicate. Alexis translated, her voice growing more urgent with each passing moment. It's a harvester," she explained. "Part of an automated system left behind by Nexus's creators. It travels from world to world, collecting resources and sentient beings for study." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. General Reeves was the first to speak. "Can we destroy it?" Alexis shook her head. "Not with our current technology." But she paused, looking up at Nexus. "We might be able to communicate with it. Nexus knows the codes, the protocols. If we can link our systems with Nexus's neural interface, we might be able to send a signal the harvester will recognize." What followed was a frantic race against time. As the harvester drew ever closer to Earth, Alexis and her team worked tirelessly to integrate Nexus's alien technology with their own systems. It was a monumental task, fraught with setbacks and moments of near despair. But finally, with mere hours to spare, they were ready. Alexis stood before a jury-rigged console, her hands hovering over the controls. Nexus loomed behind her, a nest of wires and electrodes connecting the war beast to the Earth's global defense network. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Nexus trilled in response, its sensors focused intently on the screens before them. With a deep breath, Alexis initiated the sequence. The room filled with an otherworldly hum as Nexus's consciousness merged with the Earth's communications array. On the main screen, a series of complex, alien symbols began to flash. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. The harvester continued its relentless approach, now visible to the naked eye as a menacing shape in the sky. Then suddenly, it stopped. A collective gasp went up from the assembled officials as the harvester hung motionless in the upper atmosphere. Slowly, almost gracefully, it began to turn. "It's working," Alexis breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Nexus is communicating with it, telling it that Earth is protected, that we're not to be harvested." They watched in awe as the massive alien construct began to move away from Earth, picking up speed as it retreated into the depths of space. As the immediate danger passed, the control room erupted into cheers and sighs of relief. But Alexis' attention was focused solely on Nexus. The war beast seemed drained, its usual vibrant energy dimmed. "You did it," she said softly, disconnecting the wires with gentle hands. "You saved us all." In the days that followed, the world learned of Nexus's role in averting a potential global catastrophe. The alien war beast, once feared and misunderstood, was now hailed as a hero. But for Alexis, the victory was bittersweet. She knew that Nexus's actions would draw attention, not all of it welcome. As she watched her alien friend bask in the sunlight of its outdoor enclosure, she couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. "We did good, didn't we?" she murmured, sitting beside Nexus. The war beast trilled softly, leaning its massive form against her in a gesture that had become comfortingly familiar. Alexis smiled, but her eyes were serious. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it? There's so much more out there, so much we need to learn, to prepare for." As if in response, Nexus's sensors swiveled towards the sky. Alexis followed its gaze, staring up at the vast expanse of stars. She knew then that their journey was far from over. The bond between human and alien, forged in the crucible of crisis, would be tested again and again. But as she sat there, side by side with a being from beyond the stars, Alexis felt ready to face whatever the universe might throw at them. Together, they had saved the world. And together, they would help shape humanity's future among the stars, changing perceptions, 5 years had passed since the day Nexus helped save Earth from the alien harvester. The world had changed dramatically in that time, and at the center of that change stood the unlikely duo of Dr. Alexis Chen and her alien companion. Alexis stood at the podium, her eyes scanning the sea of faces before her. The United Nations General Assembly chamber was packed, with representatives from every nation hanging on her every word. Beside her, Nexus loomed large, its presence no longer a source of fear, but of hope and fascination. Distinguished delegates, Alexis began, her voice steady and clear. 5 years ago, we stood on the brink of annihilation, saved only by the intervention of a being we once considered a threat. Today, I stand before you to propose the next step in our journey as a species. She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. The Nexus Initiative, as we're calling it, will be a global effort to prepare humanity for its place among the stars. Drawing on the knowledge and technology we've gained from our friendship with Nexus, we aim to revolutionize our understanding of the universe and our role within it. As Alexis outlined the ambitious plans, ranging from advanced space exploration to diplomatic protocols for potential alien encounters, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The years following the Harvester incident had been a whirlwind of scientific breakthroughs and societal changes. Nexus's neural interface had provided insights into quantum computing that leapfrogged human technology ahead by decades. The medical applications alone had revolutionized treatment for numerous diseases once thought incurable. But beyond the technological advancements, there had been a profound shift in humanity's collective psyche. The undeniable proof of intelligent alien life, coupled with Nexus's actions to protect Earth, had fostered a new sense of unity among nations. Old rivalries began to fade as people realized the vastness of the challenges and opportunities that lay beyond their planet. Of course, the path hadn't been smooth. There were still those who feared the influence of alien technology, who argued that humanity was moving too fast. Alexis and Nexus had faced assassination attempts, legal challenges, and moments of intense public scrutiny. But through it all, their bond had only grown stronger. Nexus had continued to evolve, its communication with humans becoming more nuanced and complex. It had even begun to display a sense of humor, much to Alexis's delight. As Alexis concluded her speech, outlining the final points of the Nexus Initiative, she felt a familiar warmth in her mind. Nexus, sending waves of encouragement and pride through their mental link. The applause that followed was thunderous, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the UN building. Alexis smiled, but she knew that this was just the beginning of an even greater challenge. Later that evening, as Alexis and Nexus stood on the balcony of their New York hotel room, gazing up at the stars, she felt a sense of both excitement and trepidation. "We've come so far," she murmured, her hand resting on Nexus's armored hide. "But there's still so much we don't know, so much we need to prepare for." Nexus trilled softly, its sensors focusing on a particular point in the night sky. Alexis followed its gaze, understanding the unspoken message. Somewhere out there were the beings who had created Nexus, who had sent the Harvester. One day, they might come looking for their lost war beast. But Alexis was no longer afraid. She and Nexus had faced seemingly insurmountable odds before, and had emerged stronger for it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As if reading her thoughts, Nexus gently nuzzled her shoulder, emitting a series of clicks and whirs that Alexis had long since learned to interpret as affection. She smiled, her resolve strengthening. "You're right," she said. "Whatever comes, we'll be ready." The Nexus Initiative was more than just a scientific endeavor or a diplomatic mission. It was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of understanding and cooperation across the barriers of species and stars. As Alexis and Nexus stood there, silhouetted against the New York skyline, they symbolized the best of both their worlds. Human ingenuity and determination combined with alien wisdom and technology. They were living proof that the universe, vast and mysterious as it was, need not be a place of fear and conflict. Instead, it could be a frontier of endless possibility, waiting to be explored by those brave enough to reach out in friendship rather than fear. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Alexis felt a surge of optimism. With Nexus by her side and the united efforts of humanity behind them, she knew that they were ready to take their first real steps into the cosmic community. The story of the human who adopted an alien war beast was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But one thing was certain: it would be a tale told and retold across the stars for generations to come. As the sun rose on a new day, Alexis and Nexus turned their gaze from the fading stars to the bustling city below. There was work to be done, a future to shape. Together, they stepped back into the room, ready to face whatever adventures the universe had in store for them. The end of one chapter, but the beginning of a greater story. The story of humanity's journey to the stars, guided by the unlikely friendship between a curious scientist and a former engine of war turned protector and friend.